Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 121 of the Sports Daily College Basketball Podcast. I'm your host, Sean Vowles. I've got Mike Kumar with me, and it's our first episode of 2026. It's been a couple weeks since we last released a video or a podcast, so we're just going to go over a few of the headlines that happened while we were gone. And Mike, luckily, number one on the topic list is about your Baylor Bears. James Nnaji, who was in the NBA G League in the Karl Anthony Towns trade, has gotten college eligibility, and he's now your center, your backup center at Baylor. So obviously, if you want to read all the legal stuff, you can go somewhere else for that. But from a lot of people are denouncing this, but what are your thoughts on the whole situation?
Yeah, Baylor basketball is getting a lot of hate for this. First off, I'd like to say hate the player, don't hate the player, hate the game. We didn't create the rules. Scott Drew was very clear that, he doesn't like this rule that G League guys can play in the league, but it's the league that we're in. Baylor is able to add people at the in between the season. Scott Drew actually alluded to this about 10 days before it happened. He got asked in the press conference, are you going to be making any changes mid-season in a post-game press conference? And he said, yeah, stay tuned. So we kind of knew something was going to happen. This is what happened. I think there is a lot of misinformation about all this stuff. So first off, Nnaji never actually played in the
Yeah.
G League. So he was drafted by the Pistons, never played for anything. He played in a summer league, I think this past summer, maybe. But aside from that, only played overseas. So first, there's players that were in the G League that came back to play in college. We've got a bunch of those. Najee's not one of those guys. He went and played overseas, which is not uncommon. There's a lot of guys in college dating back to years prior, several years prior, that have played college ball after playing professionally for a couple of years. The only difference is Nnaji was drafted 31st overall, which is, the first pick of the second round. So I think that's why it's getting a lot more heat. Nnaji didn't look his best. He's going to be the starter going forward. Scott Drew has said that. However, this is the first basketball he's played since 2024 competitively, aside from the summer league. So you could tell he's a little bit out of shape. Scott Drew initially said that he was only going to play 5 to 7 minutes. A lot of disapproving fans at that school in Fort Worth. I don't really care what they think, but I'm sure he'll get a lot of boos this year. And I think a lot of people are more frustrated about this, but I think it's completely different than guys that played in the G League and came back. Yes, I get it. He was drafted, but he never played professional ball in the United States. And there's a lot of people that play in college that haven't.
And Charlie Baker, the president, I guess his title is, of the NCAA, former governor of Massachusetts, he seemed to have drawn a line in the sand in this, saying, like, if you have an NBA contract, if you play in the NBA, that's it. There were some rumors going around. Trenton Flowers is a G League guy now. He actually played 8 times for the Bulls. Some teams were asking about him potentially getting into college. It seems like the line has been drawn there. Obviously, that is a little bit easier said than done with how the NCAA has dealt with things over the years. But it appears that if you play in the NBA, if you get a contract to play in the NBA, you're not going to be able to play in college still. Um, that I think has caused a little bit of the hate to drop down here. And I don't know if there's a bunch of other players that can fit into this situation, right? He's not an American. He didn't play college basketball yet. Um, he was drafted but didn't play. Like, if you play college basketball, get drafted to the NBA, I still think there's no chance you can come back for that. But the eligibility clock didn't really start. I believe he's from Africa, some country there. So I think this might be a one-time situation here. I don't know if we're going to see a lot of this in the future, and I think that that's probably a good thing. I've got the box score up here, Mike, as you were talking about. 16 minutes, 5 points in Baylor's loss to TCU yesterday as we're recording this. I think, obviously, like you said, he hasn't played much. He hasn't, he probably just learned these guys' names that he's on
Yeah.
the team that he's with. He didn't go there all summer. he didn't do a training camp. So I think we'll have to monitor this situation going forward. But it appears now that it's a unique situation, and I don't know if we're going to see it happen with somebody else.
Absolutely. And look, the NCAA does need to be drawing the line in the sand on a lot of things.
Yeah,
And it gets a little bit of flack because, and I think I'll probably get a lot of flack for saying what I said earlier, um, because this guy was drafted, but and the reality is that he never played in the NBA. Now, I think it is totally fair if they want to say the rule is if you played any professional ball anywhere, you cannot play in
and
college,
and
and I
that
think most
tip
coaches
that
would
has been
actually
the
support
rule
that.
if in Europe until you're 18, I believe, or like
Yes,
pros have been coming over from Europe and playing college basketball for decades now. That is,
years.
yeah.
Yeah. Um, so like, and if that's the line that they want to draw in the sand, I think you'd get almost unilateral agreement across all college basketball coaches, even the guys that currently have players that are doing that, that might lose eligibility. I think there would still be a lot of support. With that being said, the NCAA has been in the business of not creating any rules and just creating gray areas for the last 6 years since NIL became a thing. So, I agree. We got to figure this out. It
And
is,
that
yeah.
is they say it's because they keep losing in court. Well, they keep losing in court because the rules were never clear in the first place. It's not the other
Exactly.
way around.
Yeah.
And we're seeing it a lot in football right now with Pavia and Chambliss suing for another year. Um, they were successful once. Don't think they're going to be as successful this time around. But
No.
these sorts of stories are not going anywhere in terms of like fighting the NCAA. Maybe an NBA draft pick. We might not see another one come back to college, but the the overarching story here is probably here to stay. But all right, Mike. Well, topic number 2 today is going to be a Micah Shrewsberry, the Notre Dame coach, hasn't been going great for him this year. We thought that there was a chance that they could take the step up in year 3 for him out there. They haven't been terrible, but their best player is out for the season, and he was in the news for all the wrong reasons Saturday night. A throwback to some Pac-12 after dark when Notre Dame went out there to play Cal. This was a game that was really close. I don't think it ever got more than a few points. It's Cal that gets the victory on a very, very controversial call at the end of the game, and it was ended up being a foul continuation. He makes a 3 4 point play. They win by a point. Micah Shrewsberry was not happy, and here is what happened after the game was over. And so I don't you can't see this, Mike, but he and people have probably seen this too. But he chased after the referees. He was held back before coming close. Really, he's been like reprimanded by the league. No suspension, just a fine and an apology. But just wanted to get your thoughts on what happened out there at Cal. This was actually Friday night.
Yes. Yes. Oh, excuse me. So first off, it was a terrible call.
Yeah,
Like,
that's
like,
that's that's the number one thing. He was right.
and so to a degree, you can't be mad at him for being upset when the refs single-handedly gave Cal the game. Notre Dame was up by 3. They were trying to foul before Cal could shoot a 3. They did foul him before he could shoot a 3. In all reality, Notre Dame should have won that game. Instead, it's a 4-point play. Cal gets the win. Notre Dame comes home with the loss. With that being said, like this isn't the first time Shrewsbury's been in the news for something that he's said or done that's bad. He went nuclear in a press conference last year. He's had a couple interesting moments this year so far after a pretty embarrassing loss before Christmas. But you can tell he feels the pressure and he acted out. And you know, I'm not going to say it's the most outrageous thing I've ever seen a coach do. I think Juwan Howard wins that award for punching a coach in the face. I don't know what Joe had to say about that at the time, but uh, this is pretty crazy.
Yeah,
Chasing after a coach. We've seen coaches scream and yell at refs, but to literally be held back by pretty much your entire team because you're trying to, in all intents and purposes, scream or take a shot at one of the refs. It's pretty crazy, especially before shaking hands with the Cal coach. I'm not sure if he did get to end up shaking hands with the Cal coach. I assume he probably did, but a pretty wild chain of events. And I think the Shrewsberry experiment at Notre Dame is probably about to expire. You've had a few of these moments that haven't reflected very well on the school. You can tell he's clearly feeling the pressure. And this team has not gotten any better since Notre Dame fired their legendary coach, Mike Bray. So I think Shrewsberry can kind of feel that pressure. And I think his days are numbered at Notre Dame. I don't even know if he makes it through the end of the year.
Yeah, that's another thing. I think, yeah, he probably shouldn't have done that, but people are acting like he should be fired or suspended for this. Like he didn't. He just yelled at them really loudly. He
He
didn't.
didn't
He
throw
never
a chair
got to
across the
them.
court.
He never. There was no physical contact. There was no nothing.
Yeah.
So like, and Notre Dame fans have been in the news recently for things other than basketball. This sort of happens. Like refs give away games to other teams too. Like this sort of thing, unfortunately, has happened probably 10 times this year across the sport, and a couple, probably a dozen times or so last year. It's just the nature of the beast that we're in. Like they don't have accountability. They're not. There's some great refs out there. They should get more credit, but there's a ton of bad ones too, and they're going to be out there for their next assignment. It's just something that for whatever reason doesn't happen, and I think we're starting to see it with some of these umpire scorecards in baseball. But in terms of like the refs who got the call wrong, they're probably not ever going to be heard from again about this. And Micah Shrewsberry is going to be remembered for this for quite a while. But when it comes to long term, Mike, I do think that Notre Dame might be thinking about going in another direction at the end of this year. That for whatever reason, Notre Dame isn't like a great basketball job. Like Mike Bray did a lot of good things there. He had a couple good teams, a few Elite Eights, I think. But
Yeah.
they're in the ACC. Like they should be a top
It should be a blue blood.
four
Yeah.
or five program in the ACC. Like basketball programs have succeeded when they're at football schools. Whether look at Michigan right now, look at Alabama, basically any SEC school other than Kentucky. Like they should be able to get somebody that can do a better job in there.
It
And
shouldn't be so hard to win at Notre Dame when you have that much money, that much influence, and that much support. I really should. I understand Notre Dame basketball doesn't have the same following that Notre Dame football does. They don't have the same NBC contracts and everything, but there's no reason that this job shouldn't be a highly coveted job and they can get really good coaches to want to come and recruit talent and win. I will say one more thing on the refs, and I think probably a frustration of Notre Dame fans, a lot of fans, specifically the Big 12 is notoriously not great officiating. Is when are these refs going to be held accountable, right? And I think that's a frustration because you're going to see these same guys. They're going to call a game on probably Tuesday or Wednesday. They're going to call a game on Saturday, and they're going to call probably another 25 games throughout the rest of the year when you include the ACC tournament and postseason play. And when do you have that accountability? When an officiating crew single-handedly gives the game to the opposing team. And that's what happened here. Cal would not have won that game at all without the 4 point play gift that was given to them by the officials. So, and I think that's a really fair question is when are we going to have some accountability for officiating? Because it doesn't really happen.
the real answer to that, Mike, is that I don't think enough people want to be referees. And then like
That's fair.
especially
Yeah.
on if you add on top of that like them being publicly reprimanded every time they make a mistake, then like these refs do work a lot. Like they probably
Yes.
work 3 to 4 times a week. Like they're refing more games than teams are playing, and
Yeah.
like it's the United States. Teams are far apart. They're traveling all the time. Like I don't know if it's a profession that a lot of people want to get into, and that's
It is a
probably
thankless
why
job. Yeah.
they can't be burning every ref who has a bad day, and
Mhm.
like some of them certainly should not be refing anymore, but some of them probably just tough. Like they have good games and bad games,
Mhm.
like
Yeah.
players do
But that
too.
was egregious,
Yeah, but
you know.
when you do enough to win a game, and then it gets taken away from you, like that
Yeah.
hurts. And it happened to Indiana last year against
Yeah.
the team with the guy traveling and then hitting a game winning three. Forgetting
Yeah.
which team it was, but
Yeah. I'm thinking Baylor, Iowa State 2 years ago, and the guy ejected Scott Drew for a bunch of nonsense. Like, yeah,
and
yeah,
the long answer is it probably evens out over the course of the season, but there's only 30 something data points. Like maybe it won't, right?
yeah,
In a baseball season where there's 162 games or NBA with 81, 82, like maybe it does, but with less and less, data points,
yeah.
the chances that it evens out are less. But all right,
Especially with the team on the wrong side of the bubble.
yeah, and um, and it's obviously every call matters throughout the game, but the ones at the end get amplified. You see it with the 2 minute report from NBA games, um, because yeah, that's where the game was won and lost, and especially in this game, like that was like truly a toss up game between Notre Dame and Cal. I don't think it got more than 7 or 8 points either way. Like this was going to be a true coin toss game, and when something like that happens in a true coin toss game, it can be tough to take, especially for the losing
Yeah.
team. But all right, Michael, let's go back over to your conference in the Big 12. It has been one of the biggest, non-stories of the year. It's Kansas, and they fell to 10-4 with a 81-75 loss against UCF yesterday. Darryn Peterson has been in and out this year. He comes back in this one. He has 26 points. He plays only 23 minutes. There was a period on the second half where he like pulled a chair and was sitting separate from his teammates. But what are your thoughts here on this Darryn Peterson situation? Is Kansas really needs him. He's going to be a lottery pick. He probably doesn't really need to play much the rest of the year. He's trying to push through it. He's not really getting through a couple games in a row without getting hurt again. But what are your thoughts on this whole
Yeah.
Peterson
I mean,
situation?
hamstrings are really touch and go. And his family and Bill self communicated about a week or two ago that they didn't want Peterson to play until he was 100%. And it seemed pretty clear he was not 100% when he came back. And I think that was also really hard to tell.
Yeah,
I would not be surprised at some point if Darian Peterson's family shuts him down
yeah,
and says, "You're not going to play the rest of the year because of your injury." It might happen soon. And maybe it's not a shutdown. Maybe they say, "You're not going to play for a month and let's reevaluate in February." Kansas clearly needs this guy. 26 points in 23 minutes.
and they
That's
still
crazy.
lost.
Yeah, and they still and look, UCF, I think we're starting to learn that they might be a better team than we thought they were.
And
They
it's
had that
it's a
early.
road game. It's far away from the other Big 12 teams. Like,
Kansas has historically done very poorly there,
yeah,
very poorly. And look, UCF's only loss this year is to an undefeated Vanderbilt. We've learned they're a pretty good basketball team. They really hadn't played anybody else. So maybe there's a case that, hey, UCF is better than we thought they were. And they've given Kansas the business also at Allen Fieldhouse. I think it was last year or 2 years ago where the officials kind of gave Kansas the game over Central Florida. Knights fans will remember that one. So, you know, I don't want to press the panic button too much on Kansas basketball. It's a tough game. This is their first, I think, true road game since NC State. And they proved that in that game, like going on the road for them is clearly tough for this Jayhawk squad, at
and
least early on in the year. And
and
you're going to see consistently in the Big 12 that the winning percentage for home teams is going to be pretty outrageous, I think. So I don't want to read too much into this, but it is a little bit concerning to wonder, are we going to see a healthy Darian Peterson the rest of the year? And if so, when is that going to happen? And if it doesn't happen, when does he get shut down?
I think we're headed towards a shutdown. Like you said, timing wise, could be soon, could be later. But the thing with hamstrings is like you can't really do anything to get it better other than just not play. Like you
Yeah.
just rest, don't run, don't push off, all that. And we're hearing conflicting stuff like way back to the beginning. Was it an injury? Was it he was late for? We don't know. He's missed games this year. It appears that they've all been for hamstrings. While he was out for a while there, Kansas figured some things out. They're playing at a decent level, but that NC State game, like you said, Mike, Peterson did not play. NC State not the team that we probably thought that they were. They're probably on the outside looking in right now. And Melvin Council hit 8 threes and they won by 1 point. So don't Kansas still top 20 across the analytics. They're a top 10 defense. Um, and UCF is 43rd in Ken Palm right now, which is good for the eighth best team in the league, in between Baylor at 33 and TCU at 53. So look, this isn't a bad loss, but it was one that they were like neck and neck the whole way, and they just sort of lost it at the end. But it's a rotation that's not very deep to begin with, and if you take away the top, everybody's got to step up one spot. So that is something to monitor going forward. I think it's probably best for him if he doesn't play for a while, and then maybe makes a push late. But then if you make the push late, we're talking about like conference tournament, which Kansas has typically not taken very seriously. Multiple games in consecutive days, and then
It's not
NCAA
good for
tournament
hamstring. Yeah.
where you have 2 games in 3 days at a neutral court, where the treatment of facilities is for and like so. I don't know how this ends. I don't think it's going to be. I don't think he's going to like lead this team to an Elite Eight or something. Like they aren't good enough. He's probably the top 3 pick right now, maybe. I think Boozer, Wilson, DeBanza maybe could be ahead of him, but he won't be further down than that. But
Yeah.
let's go to another topic here, Mike. It happened yesterday at Madison Square Garden. Another coach who thinks it's his prerogative to comment on just about everything that happens in college basketball. That would be St. John's and Rick Pitino. Kim English and Providence, who have struggled this year, come back from down by quite a bit and take this game in the Garden, 77-71. Rick Pitino commented a lot on the Baylor situation, but on the home front for him, things are not as hot as we probably thought they were. Now, we did say, both of us, I believe, said that they were probably not the 5th best team in the country going into the year. It appears that it is a lot worse than that, Mike. They have a lot of talent. It just doesn't seem like the fit. If the fit is really there, like the pieces don't fit. But what are your thoughts on St. John's?
Like you said, Patino loves to share his opinion about everything because he loves the sound of his own voice. But
Yeah,
he said after this game that his team had he said every single one of his players had probably the worst night of the season. And I think right now the issue with St. John's is that they've been so inconsistent throughout the year. You looked at when they played Baylor. That first half was they looked like a top 5 team in the country. They looked phenomenal. And look, Baylor's not a great team this year, but St. John's just was so dominant on the offensive end in that game, as well as playing really good complementary defense. With that being said, what we've seen in the last 3 weeks is nothing short of disastrous for them, and they're starting to not just look like they're you know not a top 25 team. They're starting to look like a bubble team. And so that's really concerning right now, I think, for Rick Pitino's squad how can you piece wins together when you're this inconsistent and some bad losses in the Big East, they're going to go a long way to putting you at the back end of the bubble. So I think should be a lot of adequate concern for St. John's.
and yeah, I think Bubble is right. They've played a pretty tough non-conference schedule. They lost to Alabama, they lost to Iowa State, they beat Baylor, like you mentioned, lost to Auburn, lost to Kentucky, beat Ole Miss by 5 at home, and that's pretty much it. Now the analytics look pretty good because they took care of business in some of their bye games over some, pretty decent mid majors. Like they played 3 teams in the top 115, and they crushed them all. So that's why
Yeah.
their analytics are being held up a little bit. Right now they're 21st in Torvik here, but like you talk about bad losses, Mike, in the Big East. Providence at home is one right now. They're 89th,
Yeah.
and um, that is quad 3. Outside the top 75 at home is quad 3. So hopefully for their sake, Providence can play a little better and get to 75 and get that to quad 2. But Providence is a fun team. They play with a lot of energy, but they are not, I don't think, anywhere near the tournament right now. And they sort of like fell apart badly here. Like they were up by 8 to 10 the whole game. Providence pulls it close, and then they immediately folded. Like a lot of
Yeah.
times when you see teams that are, sort of in the game, sort of not, they make that push and then they run out of energy and then it goes back to what it was. That didn't happen here. And Patino, Ejiofor had 33 points and 15 rebounds. Like you've got to get him. You got to get your team. You got to get your team a victory when your best player does that. He shot
Yeah.
23 free throws, 14 makes. Not great, but not horrible. They left 13 points on the free throw line. It just sort of they won the rebounding battle here. They had more free throws. They had more threes. Like they should have won this game, and not very often can we say that Rick Pitino got out coached by Kim English. But I don't know if sort of this sort of game was coming for St. John's. I think the Big East is not a great league this year, but it's good enough where this sort of thing can happen if you're not on your game.
Yeah, and you look at this, St. John's had a 5 point lead with 3 minutes to go in this game. They lost by six. I think Providence ended the game on a 14-3 run.
And they didn't have a
That's
basket after the last media timeout.
inexcusable. Sorry.
They didn't have a basket after the last media timeout, just free
Yeah.
throws.
It's inexcusable for this team, especially at home against a not very good basketball team. Like a complete failure, a complete collapse. Patino should be focusing more on himself than other people in college basketball. That's my 2 cents.
Up next for them, Mike, they have a Midwestern trip over two teams that are playing better basketball than we thought. They've got Butler and Indy on Tuesday, and then Creighton in Nebraska on Saturday, who both of those teams are top 50, so you have an opportunity for some quad one wins there. But at this point, Mike, they come out of there 1-1, and that's not the end of the world.
I guess. I don't think that's good. Look, Creighton is performing better of recently. They just had a pretty crazy loss to Seton Hall. That was a really fun comeback there at the Rock. But look, neither of these are tournament teams still. I mean, Butler,
Yeah,
maybe they're on the
maybe
bubble.
one of them, but yeah, probably not.
Yeah. I mean, you look at Butler, they're 1-3 in conference right now. Uh, I maybe one of them I think is kind of a stretch right now, to be honest.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. St. John's keeps losing games. What's the best win on the resume right now? Ole Miss? That's not that good of
No,
a
I
win.
think I think
Ba
Baylor is probably the
Baylor?
best. Neutral court, Baylor's 46th, so that'll stay quad
Yeah.
one. Ole Miss is 91st, so that is not even a quad two game. That's a quad three right now.
Yeah.
Um,
But I'm gonna be honest,
yeah,
I don't know if Baylor's that win's not gonna stay a quad one win if I'm looking at the way that they're playing right now, unless Nnaji becomes like the NBA player
I
people
think
think he
Baylor will
is.
stay top 50. But
I
if
hope they
if
stay
if
top
it's
50.
if it's close, like, and they're in the high 40s all season, and then like they get blown out in the Big 12 tournament for something, like you can lose quad one wins after you get
Yeah.
them, which has
And
happened.
that's what I'm saying. It
Yeah,
is right now their best win is a borderline quad one win.
yeah, they have one quad one win and one quad two, so that means they're 2-4 across the top two quads, and that is not including the quad three
Yeah.
loss to Providence here. So just doing some tournament resume look here, like there is they the numbers are good. They're 21st, but straight up wins and losses there. Um, these are things
No.
that can stick out when you're looking at this as a bubble resume. They have these two games that we said, Mike, Butler and Creighton away, with a limited amount of quad one wins in the Big East. They might have to go 2-0 here. I might change my mind.
Yeah. I think if they go 1-1, it's welcome to the bubble, bud. Like I'm sorry. It's just they're not that great of teams. They're adequate teams. I think those are probably both quad two games. Um, but yeah, no, I just I don't see it. They're gonna need quad one wins, and it's gonna be hard to find in the Big East.
Yeah, though you'd have to drop out of the top 75 to
Yeah.
be quad two. But just doing some math right now, Mike, they have three, four, five, six. They only have seven quad one games left, and that includes the two that are coming up. They play the two Villanova games, the two Connecticut games, and then Seton Hall away is quad one right now. But Villanova at home might not be quad one. Like they're 31st, you've got to get to 25 there. So
Yeah.
like if you don't have the quad one wins, you can't have the bad losses, and they already have one of those too. So um, it's not looking too great for St. John's.
Yeah.
But all right, well, Mike, there were a ton of other games yesterday. I'll just sort of flash the scoreboard up here, and we can um, see any of them that we want here. Let's go back to the ACC. We had a Boopy Miller and SMU bring it to North
Yeah.
Carolina, 97-83.
What a game.
Andy Enfield and SMU, Mike, are 12-2 on the year. They are carving out quite the resume for themselves too, kind of out of nowhere.
Yeah, I think we're starting to realize one, a loss to Vanderbilt's not bad. They lost big time to Vanderbilt, and they have a pretty tough loss to LSU in a neutral. But aside from that, and look, maybe LSU's not as bad as we thought they were, but SMU, there's some light at the end of this tunnel right now, and right now they're a tournament team. What a statement win in their first conference game of 2026. If you look at the rest of their schedule, they actually kind of have a tougher start to the season. They got to go at Clemson and then at Duke. So, I mean, what a tough way to start your conference season. I don't think anybody would have really faulted SMU for starting 0-3. That's three quad one games to start your year. If they win one of these next two games, they're probably finding themselves in the top 25.
Yeah, and they analytically they weren't quite there until these last two games. They beat Cal State Fullerton 110-63 as 23-point favorites. That matters. And then they were this was a pick 'em across analytics, but you win it by 14. Like that is
Yeah.
big time. 1.51 points per possession, which is I saw something online, can't verify it, but the worst defensive North Carolina performance in our lifetime per Ken Palm. So Ken Palm only goes back to about then, but yes, they offense was easy for them. They hit 14 threes. They were 22 of 33 from two. They had the North Carolina defense chasing their own tail. And North
Yeah.
Carolina's a good team this year. Like I think we're probably a little bit wrong about them. They're probably they're definitely a top 25 team and protected seed range right now. But Mike, they kind of got punked here, and they didn't really have an answer for SMU's guards in the second half. But
And I think what's really surprising about this is North Carolina has been pretty solid defensively all year. And you look at their standings, even in their loss to Michigan State, that wasn't because of their lack of output on the defensive end. It was because they couldn't score. Um, I think part of it, look, it's their first road game in a month. They played one road game earlier this year at Kentucky. They actually got the win, but since then they've just had home games. Um, so I think that might be part of it is getting back into the swing of travel. Every game that UNC goes to is going to be a sellout crowd. It's just one of those. They're a blue blood program. Everybody wants to come see UNC when they come to town, and so that
especially the new teams.
exactly. So and I think that's something that a unique a new team like UNC they're probably going to have to get used to. They're going to get everybody's best shot every single night. There's only a few teams that have that privilege. Carolina's one of them.
And
So,
Mike, they SMU the new team to the ACC. They play Wake Forest at home, and then they're off to California for the California 2 game away. That's I don't remember if they went out there last year, but Stanford and Cal fans have not seen North Carolina much, maybe at all. So they're going to show up for that game too. So
yeah.
that is coming up really quickly for them. Wake Forest at home, you'd think that's probably a good spot for a bounce back, and they're still good analytically, but this was a little bit of not the norm. Like it's not like North Carolina's been bad at defense and they just didn't make enough shots in this game.
Yeah.
This was their worst points per possession score by quite a bit. They gave up 1.39 points per possession, and that was their worst by far. Michigan State was at 1.2, Ohio State 1.08. So yeah, this hopefully for them that this was just a fluke tough performance against a team that you probably haven't seen a lot, and you can get back to work. But there's the two new ACC teams right after Wake. So
Yeah.
I think we're gonna have to monitor North Carolina a little bit. Are they going to get dragged into what is turning out to be like a pretty good second tier here in the ACC, or are they going to be able to compete at the top with Duke? And
Yeah.
I think that question could be asked about Louisville too, Mike. They've lost some games. They lost to Stanford on the weekend. They went out to California, left 1-1. At this point, probably not the end of the world, but for North Carolina and Louisville, do you think they're closer to Duke, or do you think they're closer to sort of the second tier?
I think there's a clear, Duke is the best team in this conference, and I don't really think it's particularly close. So I think they fall into that second tier. You're talking SMU, UNC, Clemson. I think there's that clear delta between Duke and the rest of them. Not to say that Duke won't lose games to North Carolina on the road this year, or can get into some tough matches. I just think this team is leaps and bounds better than everybody else in that conference. I don't see anybody else winning the regular season in the ACC. But with that being said, like we talked a lot about the travel, that's something we see in the Big Ten as well. And people have their West Coast trips out to go play USC or Oregon or Washington, whatever. It adds an extra wrinkle, and you wonder how much the committee is going to value that. Because when you look at Stanford, look, not a very good basketball team. Stanford lost to Notre Dame. They only scored 40 points against Notre Dame
And that was their last
before,
game before this one too.
exactly, before shocking Louisville. But, it's pretty tough to travel. And for Louisville, two-thirds of the way across the continental US. It's a tough game to do and then come back and get ready to play teams in the Atlantic coast. So, you just wonder about that. It's kind of disappointing, I think, that college basketball is the way that it is with all the travel now. You wonder if the committee's going to play that because obviously that can't go into the analytics. But you wonder if the committee will start to throw out some of these one-off games where you're traveling such far distances and you get an out.
And we can go back to like Texas, where SMU is. That's still pretty far from North Carolina. And
Yes.
when
Yeah.
SMU has to go to California, that's still pretty far too. And even though it's not as far, but what we noticed last year with the Big Ten teams, Mike, was that when they went out west, the performances weren't that bad. It was the first game back at home that some team, especially if it was on a weekend, like a slow start, that's when teams got snake bit a little bit. It was their first home game after the two out north, Pacific West, the Washington, Oregon, or the LA trip to UCLA or USC. Notre Dame, like you said, they beat Cal, or no, they beat Stanford and then lost to Cal, as we mentioned earlier. Louisville did the opposite. They smoked Cal and they lost to Stanford. Both teams teetering around that 75 mark, so it's a chance that those are quad one games, but still, there is, they're not tournament teams at this point. I have Torvik up. You see Miami and up are the top 37. That's a pretty good spot, but then there's a big drop off to Wake in 56, and then Stanford 60, Virginia Tech, Notre Dame, Syracuse, Cal. So I think Miami up here, Louisville, Duke, Virginia, UNC, NC State, Clemson, SMU, Miami. That looks like the NCAA tournament crop of teams here that are at least going to be in consideration. Um, it maybe that gap to the third tier is a little. It looks pretty big right now, Mike. I think Miami, SMU, Clemson. I think they're considerably better than the Wakes and the California teams and Virginia Tech. I think that the California teams might have a few weird results, like we've been
Yeah.
saying, but
And Wake's had their moments this year,
yeah.
but that's what they've been. They've been flashes in the pan, it seems.
And for Wake, they have they're 10-5. They haven't lost any bad teams. In fact, they have a 1 point loss to Michigan, which, if you look over here, game score of Torvik 98 for a loss. That
Yeah.
is their second best game this year, and 99-51 victory over Campbell is the only better one. I've never seen that before, Mike. I've never seen a loss over 90, which is pretty crazy to think about. But for Wake, they're minus .2 wins above bubble. That's something to look out for. Don't know
Yeah.
how that stat is calculated, but it shows up right next to the record on Torvik, and the committee uses it too. I think if you're around 1, that's a pretty good spot on Selection Sunday. But I think Wake is unfortunately in that third tier of teams that might be able to have one or two upsets against the teams above them, but not going to consistently win enough to get to the big dance. But all right, Mike. Well, we've got time for one more topic here, and let's go down to the SEC. Alabama takes down Kentucky 89-74. Mark Pope is 0-4 against Alabama as Kentucky coach. Kentucky's 9-5 on the season. They took down Indiana at home. They beat somebody else, St. John's, on a neutral in Georgia. It appeared that they were starting to build something a little bit here. Not the case. They get run off the floor in Tuscaloosa. I think this was a barometer game for where these two teams are at in the SEC.
Yeah, I mean, it's clear that Alabama is going to compete for an SEC championship. In my opinion, they're probably the front runner right now. I know Vanderbilt's a really good team, but Alabama right now is my front runner, and Kentucky is clearly a middle tier SEC team at best right now. You look at them, I think you're still waiting to see a good quality um, win for the Wildcats. It hasn't really come yet. Yeah, they've got a couple of bubble team wins, but you're still waiting to see what's going to happen. The good thing for Kentucky is that the SEC's got a huge drop off right now compared to last year. So they're going to have a few games to get it right. They got Missouri, Mississippi State before a road game at LSU in their next three. So they're clearly not a Sweet 16 team. But these next three games are going to be important for us to see, okay, how good is Kentucky, how better of a middle tier seed are they going to have in the NCAA tournament, and how hot does Mark Pope's seat get? And how close do we get to him being let go from Kentucky if his losing ways continue? I'm gonna be honest, if Kentucky goes below 500 in SEC play, people are going to be calling for his head.
And
It's been an embarrassing year. You look at that game against Gonzaga in Nashville, they had 90% of the fans there. That was embarrassing. Michigan State loss, embarrassing. Alabama, look, I get it. Alabama's a really good team. And actually think Alabama's going to end up probably being a two seed come March. So, and potentially even better. So it's not mad about the loss, I think, but also Kentucky never stood a chance in this game. It
it,
was never even close.
it's the manner of their defeats to the elite teams here.
Yeah,
Like they lost by 8 at Louisville. They made a bunch of threes late. It was not that close. They lost by 17 against Michigan State. They lose to North Carolina at home. They get smoked by Gonzaga, as you said. They got outplayed by Indiana for 3 quarters of the game and then got hot. And they beat St. John's. Turns out that those two teams are probably on the bubble. Neither, or St. John's is a neutral. Indiana is a home. Indiana at home, you'd have to stay top 25 for that to be quad one. I think they're around 28th right now, but the resume just isn't really there to like separate them from like the 8, 9, 10 seeds that we're gonna see. And like you said, Mike, there could be a lot more L's on this schedule based on who they play in the SEC. Quite a few Reds on here, which means that they're not favored to win the game.
yeah,
Projected record per Torvik, Mike, is 18-13 and 9-9 overall. That might be good enough to get you to the tournament, but with the $22 million that have been invested into this roster, they can't
yeah.
be paying more than $1 million per win.
No, yeah, especially 100%. And like you said, not all 10 to 15 point losses are created equally. This was one where I don't think Kentucky was within single
Yeah,
digits after the 10-minute mark. Maybe briefly. I don't
and
know.
if this happens once, okay, road team, tough game, but it's happened every time they've played
Over
a
and
team
over
of this
again.
caliber.
Yeah,
Like they have a couple of easier games left, but when they go to Tennessee, chances are it happens again. They have Vanderbilt away, Arkansas away, Tennessee,
yeah,
Florida, Auburn away. Like, man, it's going to be tough for them coming up. They, it's sort of like they're just a little bit of a better version than St. John's, and I think that's why they actually beat them. The fit isn't really there. They have a lot of good players, but you've had Owe who's taken a step back. You've had Jalond Lowe, whose shoulder is not 100%. He's been in and out of there. They've had Jaden Quaintance just recently make some appearances after his torn ACL last year. It's just a lot of players maybe not carving out the exact roles that they thought they would have. and they do have to figure it out quick, Mike, because they can't go. If they go on a losing streak, there's not like they're not good enough to go on a winning streak to make up for it. Like there's the SEC is not as good as they were last year, but it's still a pretty solid league. I don't. We're not going to see the 13 bids that they got last year, but probably 10 or 11 is possible here. I think 9, 10, 11 is what we're looking at. The middle of this league is still pretty strong, like Auburn and Texas and
Yes. Mm.
Missouri just got to win over Florida. So, but yeah, we're gonna. I think Kentucky's in the middle of the pack in the SEC. But all right, Mike. Well, that's 45 minutes, so we're gonna wrap it up here. Thank you, everybody, for tuning into this episode, and we'll see you next time.